Imagine if tomorrow, without warning, the world simply dissolved its borders, that the invisible boundaries separating people in different states just went away. This is most likely a fantastious exercise for you, but bear with me. This idea of a world without restrictions on human movement is not as far-fetched of an idea as, say, reversing the trend of climate change. Many of my fellow Americans may grimace at the idea of allowing anyone from around the world to cross our borders and enter our nation without any legal obstacles, especially in the current political climate, but open borders may just be the solution that this world needs. It's a solution that's just sitting there waiting to be picked up, yet everyone is too occupied being afraid and disgusted by it to give it the light of day. Ultimately, this argument will pivot around the idea of borders. What is a border? According to Google, a border is defined as a line separating two political or geographical areas, especially countries. These lines, more often than not, are invisible. The importance and precision that we have given these lines has changed drastically over the years. This concept first molded itself into being with the introduction of agriculture. Our ancestors no longer would have the need to move their territory according to their environment like their nomadic ancestors, but instead could settle and populate a single area. This led to the creation of the first civilizations. These nations, thanks to the benefits brought forth by agriculture, were able to maintain populations and institutions at a scale larger than ever before, and these civilizations had armies to defend their societies. Unlike today, these civilizations were still generally very open and peaceful to movement. The concept of restricted movement started with serfdom in Europe, where human movement was limited as an institution. Lords wanted to limit the freedom of their peasant workers, so they passed laws to restrict many of their rights, including their freedom of movement by requiring them to carry papers explicitly giving them permission to move by their lords. This institution changed with the end of serfdom, yet it persisted. Due to the view of population as wealth, European nations would go out of their way to prevent their populations from leaving, and made grandiose offers to immigrants in order to attract larger populations. The world turned on its head with the Industrial Revolution, causing an unsustainable population increase and the advent of the Napoleonic Wars and the Irish potato famine. Suddenly, many nations wanted to restrict movement in and get rid of their populations. Cue 19th century American nationalism and feelings of resentment for the new immigrants. This would lead to the United States implementing border laws to limit the flow of people into the US. After events like World Wars and 9/11, this would only become more prominent. These events not only caused the US to more tightly control their borders, but many other developed nations as well. Recent phenomena, such as civil wars and poverty, are the modern drivers of movement of people from developing nations to developed nations. And these pressures and modern fears are what cause nations to more tightly control their immigration policies. To continue this discussion about immigrants, a definition is imperative. An immigrant is someone who crosses a border into a new nation for the purpose of changing their permanent residence. The immigrant is often seen as a foreigner that saps the nation of its cultural identity, as a leech that only feeds off the prosperity of a nation for selfish benefit, diluting the value of the nation that these people go to. I know that not every American thinks this way, but these views are what continue to keep immigration restrictions in place. The reality is that immigrants are more hardworking, more likely to start businesses, and less likely to commit crime than their native counterparts in the United States. The reasons for this are not very complicated. It takes a lot of courage, drive, and desire to leave the place that you were born in, to leave your family, culture, food, and language behind. Most of these people leave for reasons of improvement and betterment economically or to escape desperate circumstances. Many of those who are against immigration fear rise in terrorism and crime. Although these are valid concerns, these fears are greatly exaggerated by the media and are greatly outweighed by the many benefits of taking in immigrants, benefits that will be discussed later in this video. A far more subjective argument would be immigration causes a deterioration of culture. These fears are rooted in the human's innate desire to tribalize and categorize. It is a natural instinct for people to group according to different characteristics, and these characteristics, culture in this case, are very central to the identity of many people. The truth is that, yes, The culture of the United States has adapted and changed substantially due to the incorporation of many different types of people from around the world since its conception in 1776. But the fear created around this argument is very ill-informed. Human cultures were never meant to be stagnant. They are meant to change and to adapt to the changing world around them. The Egyptians aren't still worshipping Ra and the Greeks Zeus, and the world today is changing exponentially faster than ever before. The truth is that immigrants are people simply searching for a place with a better use for their skills, as their original country does not provide the institutions and infrastructure to most effectively utilize their skills. To quote my mother, a Venezuelan American immigrant who naturalized to the US.
Pasé muchos malos ratos y muchos malos momentos y como en los 2-3 primeros años me quise regresar, pero cuando me di cuenta que la cosa en mi país era cada vez peor y peor y lo hice por mis hijos, pues por mis hijos me quedé y me adapté y me esforcé y lloré, pero aquí estoy. Gracias.
The situation in Venezuela did not give the space needed to work in a comfortable fashion, and my mother went through a lot of changes in order to adapt to her new country. The fact is that changing yourself to adapt to the place you immigrate to is very difficult, and only the most hardworking or desperate will make the sacrifices necessary to move to a new country with a different language and culture. We already have a modern example of what I dream the world could be, albeit on a smaller scale. The European Union. The EU is an economic and political union of European nations, where any citizen within its borders can freely move to any other country without the need of a passport, with little, if any, restriction at all. This has been arguably one of the greatest success stories in the modern world, as the EU, if it's considered a country at the time of writing this paper, is the world's second biggest economy with a GDP of 17.1 trillion. And it's been over half a century since any nations in the EU waged war on another European nation. There is an argument that in a world with no borders, rich countries would be swamped with poor people to the point of compromising that country's institutions. This misconception is falsified when looking at the EU, as there are barriers to immigration beyond those that are legal, and these risks are mostly economic and cultural in nature. The benefits of this system have been groundbreaking despite this, as people who are hardworking risk takers are free to move and are able to put their skills in a place where they will be found more useful. The average salary in Greece is about 25,000, where in Belgium it's about 50,000, double that in Greece. Yet only 20,000 Greeks actually live in Belgium. But these few people who have taken the risk have now effectively doubled their prospects for their work. Now imagine a Beninese cook, one with an amazing talent and personalities that rivals many cooks in the developed world. This cook has the drive to go to a place with better stability, so he can earn more money and a better quality of life, but can't because no Western nation wants him. He needs to go through years of expensive screenings to get approved, more time and money that he can afford given his family of 7. In a world without borders, he could be cooking one of Paris's top restaurants. This is the dilemma of our immigration restrictions. They are in place for reasons of security and prevention, but as a result limit our economic growth and limit the opportunities for many talented people in third world countries to use to improve their conditions. A way to significantly reduce poverty is to allow people to leave the places where it persists. Workers become much more productive in places where they have the institutions and stability to function at their fullest. Restricting a person's place of work to the place where they were born gives an unfair advantage in life to the good sperm club. A world with no borders would be much more productive, and as a result, trillions of dollars richer. The case for borders is dying out, and the benefits of getting rid of this primitive concept are becoming much more apparent. We need to come to a point where we realize that we are all human, and that our tribalistic nature only limits our potential to improve as a world, and only acts to continue to allow our world's inequalities to persist. In the words of Gail Sheehy, if we don't change, we don't grow. And if we don't grow, we aren't really living. I just hope that in 80 years, humans will be able to look back to today and realize how primitive our species actually was. Hey viewer, thanks for sticking around for the whole video. If you want some of my citations that I used for this essay, those will be in the description. And if you want to a link to my interview with my mother, that's also in the description below. So check that out. Thanks again. And I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. Please.